Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac. And today I will be talking to Sean Gailey, founder of Talesworth Game Studio, who will be bringing to us one of the coolest games I've had the privilege of playing the demo for. And you can too. Like, it's on Steam. Like, anybody can go play it. That's what I did. And I just reached out because I wanted to talk to him about the ways, basically the ouroboros that is TTRPGs into video games into TTRPGs, and back and forth, and the things that we can learn from each other. So that is the conversation we will be having, and there's a lot that we can learn. But Derek and I wanted to shout out and say thank you again for coming to our second office hours. It was another amazing time of just a bunch of questions, just having fun over on the Discord. Of course, if you want to go there, it's bit.ly/DM banter. And we're trying to plan out the next one for August. So if you have any suggestions, maybe you've missed the last two because they were the wrong date, they were the wrong time, feel free to reach out wherever you can find us, either social media or our email, and let us know some dates and times that work best for you, and maybe we can try and accommodate. But with that, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The blatant meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today for the meat, we have another amazing guest. I'm very excited, and I'm dead set that we could talk about things that are not related to the topic for many hours. But we have Sean Gailey, founder of Talesworth Game Studio. Sean, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And then for our listeners, is there a little bit that you could tell us about yourself that you think they might be interested in?
So I'm making a game. It's called The Secret of Weepstone. That's the thing I want people to know the most right now. But prior to this, and as we were chatting before we got started recording, the first half of my life was running a clothing company called Jinx. And we did clothing and then toys for, just about every publisher that there is over our 23 years. So now I am full on ride or die on The Secret of Weepstone, which is a black and white dungeon crawler based on and inspired by late 70s and early 80s D&D art and that play style.
I have played the demo and two things. One, can I have more demo, please? And thank you. Two, I feel like that was a bit of an undersell, but we'll get into it. Because the topic will touch back on that specifically. So I'll save a few more questions that I have until we jump into the meat. But is there anything else that you're working on? And then of course with NDAs that permeate our worlds, that you can tell us about.
Prior to starting on The Secret of Weepstone, I had several projects going. Like one in particular, and I grabbed the book real quick. I just make sure I get it right. But there was this old paper book game, combat game called Lost Worlds. It was like each person would get a book, and like if I'm playing the skeleton and you're playing the barbarian, I would give you my skeleton book and you would give me your barbarian book. And then it's kind of like I do this, you do that, turn to this page and see what happens. And it's an old book from when I was a kid. And there's like a ton of different books, like characters you can play. And I made a Discord version and went and got the license as well. And that just, when Weepstone took off, like when it was like, okay, I'm doing Weepstone, this is it. And then Dread XP decided to publish it. Then it was like everything else kind of fell, this is like all like I'm doing now is just Weepstone all day, every day.
I didn't know that there were RPG versions of that. I remember playing. Oh, that's super cool. Okay. So I only ever played the like dogfight version of like you're playing A, I'm playing B, and we have two booklets, and then we kind of go back and forth. Which
that was the same company.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Same guy that did that. Alfred Leonardi. Mm-hmm. He did that. I can't remember the name of it, but he did that. dogfight books later. And in fact, they just did, I remember that they did a Kickstarter not too long ago to reprint those books. But the Lost Worlds, the fantasy combat one, oh man, it's terrible. Like, it's derpy in terms of like, you do a move and they do a move, and sometimes they just don't make sense, like the outcome. But it's just kind of a stupid, a little bit unfair. It doesn't feel 100% balanced. But if you really know the books, I've heard people say like, no, they're pretty well balanced. But yeah, you can just play on Discord, and it's asynchronous. So, and there's like I built a tournament schedule for it. Like, you can start tournaments and then sometimes if you lose, you can die. So it's
nice.
like if your character gets hit hard enough and killed bad enough, if they go to like -8 hit points or something, they are killed permanently and you have to start over. It's just, which, as you may have guessed from Weepstone, I love death in video games. So
I did learn that is a possibility. I may have made some very poor choices during my run and tested the limits and found quickly, I could lose character if I'm not being smarter. So
that's right.
I did have one jump down the latrine. Let's be honest with each other. You got to sacrifice a character.
The DM does say, if someone doing this would be wishing for certain death or something along those lines, and you throw the rock and you can feel it's really far, there still is a little bit of like kind of like instant death there. But one of the reasons I put that in there was because for the demo, I wanted to teach death. I wanted to bring the players, to teach them about mortal favors, which of course you get when someone dies. Every character has a unique mortal favor that is a permanent boon that they give to everyone else in the party. And so it was an important part of the demo to make sure someone died, or not make sure, but increase the likelihood, keeping with like the OSR sensibilities and play style. Generally speaking, I try to always call out incoming danger, make danger not obvious, but hint at the dangers and things that you need to be aware of so that you can try to avoid it. I mean, that was a big part of playing, like the game is stacked against the player in old school role playing, like the cards were stacked against you, especially at low levels. So in order to handle that, it's not always a good idea to fight. And that's not, if you've played, I'm sure you've played modern role-playing games, and there's some great ones out there, but the big, like D&D 5e, it's like fighting is, first of all, you never die. And second of all, you're expected to usually fight, I would say. I'm sure there's people that would argue or disagree with me about that, but generally speaking, you're not trying to avoid fights. And in an OSR, that was part of it. Again, especially at level 0 or level 1.
Yeah. Oh, I learned a valuable lesson. No one else died after the first one. So it taught me immediately what was going on. So the other thing we do real quick, though, is for a surprise question, and usually it's related to what we're talking about. Is there a module that always stands out to you? Like when you think about like the older modules, because even visually and stylistically, those come up a lot in Weepstone, but like, is there a module that always stands out as like for you, like that number one?
Oh, don't even get me started on those, on the basic modules. But I think the two that would stand out the most to me are Palace of the Silver Princess and White Plume Mountain. So in fact, the original, this is going way back beginning Weepstone, my original plan and the dream, and this goes back 10 years. I've been wanting to make this game, at least maybe 15. I always wanted to replay the old modules in a way, like you can't always get a group together to play D&D, obviously, but a lot of times I just want to kind of relive the old modules. Like I'll go back and read them sometimes, just to remember them. And I thought, oh, how cool would it be if you could go through one of these old modules? And so the original prototype, the original, like OG prototype, vertical slice of Weepstone was Palace of the Silver Princess, the opening area. And then I was going to go out to try to get the D&D license. And like, that was like kind of the whole plan. And it became clear to me though, that D&D was never going to try something this, you know, first of all, I think that they want to focus on newer, their new IP, you know, 5e and keep the story going, and not as much on, old school, like the earliest, like basic stuff. And I get that. That's fine. And second of all, an all black and white game and using the old rules, or at least loosely based on BX rules, that just probably wasn't going to happen, at least not for the first one. Who knows down the line? And then White Plume Mountain, that was the very first module I ever played. Going to my cousin's house, you know, that he was running it with his two brothers, and my brother and I kind of jumped in, and you know, we're given a character, and that was my introduction to it. And he was actually running a mix of Dungeons and Dragons rules and another old game called Chivalry and Sorcery, which not a huge tabletop game, but it was, you know, around that time, one of the many kind of like secondary rule systems that were out there. And I just fell in love with it. And I just love, you know, White Plume Mountain is just an amazing mishmash of just random stuff. So, you know, I just love it.
Longtime listeners will know that mine has to be the U series, Sinister Secret at Salt Marsh, because for me, that's the first thing I was ever introduced in. And I have like a really, really nice copy that I got off of eBay at one point. And then later, the guy who originally ran it through me gave me his original copy. That was like the first thing I ever played in. So I have both of those. But yeah, those are super nice. I had never thought to just kind of get that hit of nostalgia by reading through it.
I just reread Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh like probably 3 weeks ago. I just reread it. I love those too.
Yeah. And we could probably wax poetic in a way, long-term business-wise, about the idea that focusing simply and only on AAA games is risky, and doing smaller games that bring people in a much more reasonable way is probably really smart for a large company. But we don't have to spend all our time on super fun topics like that. So instead, we'll keep talking about Weepstone, because one of the things that drew me most to the game after playing through it was its ability to look more succinctly at how both things relate to each other. Because even the things that you were talking about already are so important for anyone playing at their own table or playing at a con game or doing those certain things. Because like one of the things that stood out to me the most in the way that you were talking is a thing that I don't think we say enough is if you have a game that is set up in a way that death is very real and you don't tip your hand about it as a person running it, that's not necessarily fair. Like they need, or they'll feel like you yanked the rug out from them, or that you didn't treat, you know, that the player may feel like they weren't treated fairly. And, but if you can point back to like, no, there were the giant red flashing signs that said, Neal, don't put that person in the latrine. And Neal did it anyways, and they died a terrible death. And I learned a valuable lesson. So,
well, and that's like, if you think back to some of your best memories, or at least I'll speak for myself. Some of my best role-playing memories are characters dying. You know, like, imagine if you're new to D&D and you've only been playing for 5 years, right? And you started playing 5th edition, let's just say, and you've probably never lost a character. You don't have any stories of character loss. You don't know that part of the game. And like, I just can't imagine never having that in my role-playing games. Like, in fact, I just saw, and I'm trying to remember the podcast, my brother sent me a link to, it was a Shadow Dark live play, and I don't remember the name of the group, but a character died. Well, like one of the characters dies, and it was just the way that they played it out. I mean, you know, I don't watch a lot of live plays. I'd rather just play myself, but it was just this little clip of a character dying and it was just so impactful, you know, like they had been playing for 3 weeks or something, and then someone died, and it wasn't expected and it wasn't unfair. It was just some stuff went the wrong way. They didn't plan their light correctly. They were in total darkness, if you've ever played that game. And it just went south and someone died. And you could tell that he was genuinely unhappy. It wasn't just acting or whatever. Like, he was clearly upset that he had lost a character and he was trying to role play at the same time. But yeah, that suspense that it builds, everything matters so much more. Your wins matter so much more. And if you're just always going to win, that's just not fun for me. That's why I've got 400 plus hours in Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, because we don't always win, and that's when there's a chance of losing, it changes everything.
Yeah. I think it even goes back. There's been a lot of psychology lately about what it feels like to have played games around more of when we were playing games as kids to playing games now, and the process of just not winning and having to go back and do it again, and then not winning and then getting a little further. I mean, I feel like in retrospect, the term roguelike was just, no, those were games. Like, we died and we had to do it again and get a little further and then die again and then run out of lives and then start completely over. The other thing I think about is how impactful experiencing character death can be for everyone at the table, and it not necessarily need to be your character. Because I can think about a lot of scenarios that weren't my character. Well, there's one I think of, and the hand was tipped. It was certainly tipped. He was told many times that if you keep putting all these potions on you and something happens, it will be bad. Like, if you fall down and you just have a bandolier of weird potions, we're going to roll some dice and you may be okay. Or you may explode and nothing is left but your pants, because that's exactly what happened, because the only thing that was magical was pants. So, that was it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, those stories are, anyway, some of my favorite experiences. And Weepstone, somebody had mentioned on Twitter not too long ago, that they had a really brutal encounter, like the Iron Belly had disintegrated 3 weapons or something, and by the second fight they were down 3 characters. And I said, I've played that demo as you can imagine, and we've all play tested it, and and I've watched hundreds of people play at conventions. I told him, I said, that's a very unusual experience. It is a hard game from the fact that you might lose people, but it's not, I don't want it to be that hard. I'm not trying to make Dark Souls, The perfect experience, in my opinion, is that you do have some characters that die, but you're not reloading a bunch. Like, in fact, I would love it if you can play the whole game just like real D&D. You don't reload in real D&D or a real tabletop. So just like in a real tabletop campaign, I'm hoping that it will be some character death, but generally speaking, if you're smart, you're gonna be okay. And somehow these level 0 nobodies are gonna change, not the world, but maybe this region. So, I don't want there to be a lot of reloading. I don't want it to be a frustrating experience. I want the death to be fun, and that's why there's mortal favors, which are part of the story, which you'll learn more about. But it's also a mechanic that is kind of eases that pain of losing somebody. And it's a way to remember them too, because they're still kind of, their spirit is there helping you. So it kind of keeps them as part of the game, which I like too.
Yeah, I think that mechanic is, again, very interesting, because it is one of the biggest factor. I mean, I don't know that it ever crossed my mind to reload, but when it happened with the mortal favor, it immediately was a no, because I was so interested in that new mechanic, because I find that to be such an interesting thing to potentially adapt back to the table, because I do a lot of convention games, or even if it's a one shot or things like that. And if someone, honestly, like, just from my personal perspective, I'm going to put huge kid gloves on if we're at a con game, because I can only imagine that you spent that money or you spent your time, effort, whatever, to be sitting at the table, and then you die, or your character dies, and now you what? You know, that's a rough go. So the idea of having that mechanic or some mechanic to allow them to still interact and play with the story, I think is like really drew me to just keep pushing forward. Yeah. So what drew you to do that specifically instead of just having it just be a character death?
I mean, it's so much of the game, like the mechanics are based on, I mean, years, of course, a lifetime of playing games and feeling what works and what doesn't work. Some of it's always, there's a little bit of personal preference, but having death as part of the game and having it as a part of the game that I wanted people to lean into, that just is a bridge too far by itself, I think, for, creating a video game based on tabletop already was a challenge, right? I mean, it's like I wanted to make it 10 times harder for myself because, bringing a tabletop to a video game right away, I'm like, okay, I'm putting people on guard, like, look, you can't replace tabletop. And I've always said, I am not trying to, I never would do that. I love tabletop and I love video games. I love them both. What I'm trying to do is to bring that experience, I want to make it feel like you're playing an old school role playing game. And I hope that I feel like based on the feedback that is hitting, like that vibe is hitting. But there's the challenges of black and white, and not having everything get too mushy and you can't tell what the heck's going on, which I've seen in a lot of black and white games. It's hard to see what the heck is going on. And so that took, so many like months and months of tinkering and fine tuning to get my shader working correctly and really reading the way I wanted it to. But then there's things like secrets. Let's talk about secrets.
Yeah.
You're playing tabletop. How do you run you're in a room, say there's you're in a bedroom, right? And there's a secret button that's on the lower right side of the bed, and you push that and the secret door opens. The party walks into the room. How do you run that as a DM?
So there's a couple ways that you would either have it is everyone's going to try and roll, which I have tried to curb personally at my own table, just because the law of averages of that kind of system is unfair. Because if you have 6 players and they all roll, well, come on, inevitably. So I have a tendency to push towards people that only have proficiency in what's being asked. I'm like, because you trained in it, so you get to do it. But inevitably, if it is something that's required, they're going to have to find it. So they're going to spend that extra time searching, block by block, if that's the kind of players I have.
Yeah, so to do that in a video game, we've seen it solved a few different ways, like Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if you played that game, but generally when you get near something, there's this passive perception and it rolls secretly and it lights up if you find it, right? I didn't want to do that. But then on the other side of it, there's the pixel hunt, and the old school gritters and blobbers, which I love those games, like Grimrock or Eye of the Beholder, if you go way back, and Bard's Tale.
I would say, or even Baldur's Gate, because I know right before you go into the first inn where you're going to find the first 2 NPCs out by a rock, there's this tiny, 3 pixels wide. There's a hole in that rock, and it's got a ring of spell storing. And I know right where it's at. I'll take you there right now.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that either.
Yeah.
And then the rolling thing. Great. I'm so glad you brought that up. In the normal rules, everybody can search and everyone has a 1 in 6 chance of finding something. And elves have a 2 in 6, I think, something along those lines. And I was like, okay, well, then if I do that passive check, if I was to do that, or if I put a button on the screen that says search room and everybody gets to roll, then that's, first of all, that's not fun. And second of all, they're going to find everything. So the way I and this is again, after iterating and playing and seeing what was fun, the way I decided to do it was there is no passive checking for non-elves. In other words, halflings and humans don't get a roll. The passive roll I figure is through the person playing. You're looking through the camera, you're moving around a room. The passive looking is you kind of looking. And again, no pixel hunting, but you're just generally looking around. If there's going to be something secret, I try to hint at it through the environment. I try to hint at it through, like, there might be mist coming out of a nearby crack, and it's like, oh, okay, something is going on around here. We need to spend a bit more time looking. Or the dungeon master might say something in the box text like, oh, hey, and he'll mention something that lets you know I need to spend more time looking in this room. So that's the first thing. And then if there is a secret, say there's a secret button and you are in the range of it, the game will actually roll, and you have an elf in the party. The game will actually roll for a passive check for the elf to find it. Okay. And the normal way that this would happen, I think, in most games is if the elf does find it, it immediately snaps to it and says, there's a secret here, right? That was iteration like 4 that I had done. And then I was like, all right, iteration 5, which was the one, was the elf gets to roll when you get near it. But even if the elf finds it, it does not say anything. And the player gets a chance to find it on their own. If the player finds it on their own, then it's like, okay, you found a secret. And then it forgets the whole elf thing ever happened. But if the elf rolls, finds it, and the player is looking around, whatever, and then goes to walk away, once they get far enough away, the elf thing will trigger. So it's like the player gets a chance to find it first before the elf's success roll is like triggered. And then it's like, oh, hey, before you go, the elf just noticed this. But that's an example of like, I mean, there was so many ways that I iterated it. I didn't like zoom to it. It just said there was a secret nearby. Like I tried all these different things, but this is the one that feels the best. And traps work in a similar way. If you have a dwarf who can who can notice traps, or if you are running a scroll, if you have find traps cast and active, then when you're walking around, if there's a trap, it's not going to just, notice it when you get near it and just immediately tell you, because that's not as fun, I don't think. Mm-hmm. You get a chance to find it yourself, and you might notice a trap and then do something about it. But if you run into it because you didn't notice it yourself, then it rolls for the dwarf, and the find traps kicks in and says, "Hey, look out! There's a trap here." So it's always kind of giving that player a chance to find it first, which would be more fun, I think. And for the trap concept, traps in Weepstone, it's stuff you can see. It's not like most games do traps now and have for a long time, where again, it's just an invisible collider on the ground and you have a chance to notice it when you get near it and it lights up red, right? But I really wanted to do something different and a little weirder. And in Weepstone, you can see the traps. Like you just have to be careful and pay attention. Everything I'm doing in this game is an attempt to bring role-playing to the computer in a way that feels authentic and, as close to that experience as I can get visually in the way it's played. And then also in game design, I've always tried to do something new. Like innovation is my number one goal with game design. In every game, this is probably my 7th game. And every game I've ever made, I always put innovation first. I just want to give you something to play that you've never played before.
Yeah. I love what we're doing because I think I could pick your brain all day and then some. And I've definitely come to the conclusion I would love to have you as a DM at some point, because what you ended up hitting on with the way that you're approaching them looking at traps and secrets is what I think is probably close to like a perfect way to approach a DM PC, because that's what they are. Like if you think about it, like you have your personal insert of the character that you're playing often in these types of games. And then you have like a subset of characters that you're bringing with you. Is it 4? Mm-hmm. Is it 3 to 5? Is it, whatever number the game is chosen for you, but essentially you're not running those. I mean, you kind of are, but the game is running those more than you. And the idea of having the DMPC, even if I was just running it physically at the table, to say, let all my characters, all my players do everything that they can. And they decide, hey, we're going to leave this room. And only then do I say, hey, the elf that you guys brought with you says, I think we should really check this wall. what a novel idea to approach the way you do a DMPC, or the same thing with a trap of that split, movie scene style, like that split second before dropping your foot through the pit, the dwarf puts his hand out and says, hold on, I think there's something here, but not doing it up until that moment, because you gave any opportunity that the players would have had on their own to have experienced that. I think, like I said, that's just great way to do a DMPC.
And I have actually started to think that way, now that you mention it, like bringing these ideas back to the table again. And I've heard people say that about, Mortal Favors. I'm going to use that idea at the table next time we play. For sure. And we've all, like, I'm sure you have too, over the years, I've picked up so many tips from other DMs for how they run their campaigns. I'm like, oh, I love that, But yeah, my gripes about DMing and the things that I've, kind of tried, I've never really liked in terms of rules and 10 house rule is in passive checking. Like I've never cared much for passive checking. I like there to be the players doing the things because they said they're going to do the things. Like that's what they found. Like the whole passive perception thing that never really made a lot of sense to me. But, again, to some extent, I still have it with the elf and the dwarf, but hopefully the players will have the much more rewarding and satisfying opportunity to discover themselves and say, I was being careful and I noticed this. The game didn't just tell it to me.
Well, yeah. And the other thing I think about is like, I have some pretty decent terrain, like physical terrain. And the person that made it is far above anything I plan to ever accomplish in my life. But one of the things they did was, there is a certain set of levers in one of the pieces of terrain that is a secret. And when you go up to it, the common refrain from a player would be, hey, what do I see? Or like, asking for more description. And the answer you get to give them is everything you need is in front of you. Because if you look close enough, based on like the wear and tear of the levers, you can tell what is supposed to happen. Just based on viewing the physical terrain. So I also do if you look around, this is a dungeon that is used. It's not a dungeon that's just been sitting here. So if you look, you can tell, hey, this well-worn path around these 3 blocks is probably the way we should go. Again, of tipping off the hand, especially if it's for people that haven't played before. Because I think that's probably a thing that comes to your mind when writing this. And I think it's a really important thing when writing any kind of module, be it for what you're doing or at the table, you have to assume every level of play. That a person could have played nothing before, and this is their first experience, and it needs to work for them too.
Yeah, the big challenge with this game, especially because, I was originally thinking my core is, people that are, closer to my age that have grew up playing these old games. But what I learned was that there's a whole, generations of people that have never played this kind of tabletop, and it's new for them. In addition to the art style, like this black and white art that's in my mind, fantasy art is black and white. And that's how I picture art. I picture Trampier's goblin when I think of a goblin in black and white. So, another funny thing that comes up a lot with trying to bring this to a tabletop game, especially old D&D, to the computer game is the spell choices. I don't know. This has always been a topic that boggled my mind ever since I started playing. Like for example, you have to pick what spells you want to learn, right? As a magic user, you have to pick which spells you want in your spell book, unless, of course, you find a way to scribe something into your spell book, which is something I'm doing in Weepstone. But, we had to look at all of the spells that are the classic spells that are, part of this rule system and decide, are we going to try to put every spell in the game? And the answer is that we are not going to do that. I mean, like Snake Charm, I'll just use Snake Charm as an example. Second level cleric spell. this is a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, but there's no snakes in the game. And so why let them pick Snake Charm only to have them never have an opportunity to cast it? You're going to just take up a whole, spell slot with a spell that there's like, you literally would never cast it. And that's been a real challenge, is figuring out how to use all of the different spells. And I don't know about you, but when I played D&D, our magic user, if they didn't pick sleep for their level 1 spell, then they were probably going to be pretty worthless. So,
yeah, and you're like, and getting around, you're like, what do you mean you didn't get fireball?
right.
Yeah. We're going to hire a different guy. Like, come on now.
Yeah. So how did you handle do you see people picking those spells? I mean, if you look at the spell list, there's some spells that are just so good. How do you take up a spell slot with anything but those spells,
Yeah, I think the same thing, especially a table that if they're starting at a higher level, I have a tendency to approach with a very similar mindset when it comes to magic items, because what a bummer it is if you were to take, to kind of go the same direction of like a really low hanging idea, is that what if I take a ring of water breathing and they never do anything in water the whole time. And
right.
then the next person over has a wand of magic missile.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're gonna use it. There's
right.
no ifs, ands, or buts. That person is absolutely going to use that second item. Whereas short of me shoehorning in an idea that I didn't have pre-planned for them to leverage the ring of water breathing, there's no purpose. There's no purpose
mm-hmm.
for it. So like, I have a tendency to ask about magic items a little more than almost anything else in character creation, because I can either, one, it scares me the most as the person running the game to not know,
mm-hmm.
know what magic items they have. And two, I just feel like it could be the biggest letdown for them, is to have something that they picked. They were like, this is it. This is my cool item, and I will absolutely not use it because I didn't realize there are no snakes and there are no water.
That's been a challenge for Weepstone, is what spells to include. Every single spell is like a ton of code. So I'm like, and I'm the only one coding on the game. So it's like, I really have to make sure that it's going to matter when if they pick a spell and they choose to not take sleep and they choose not to take magic missile, for just using magic users as an example, and that's one of the places I know I'm going to end up, my goal is always make decisions hard. If it's an easy decision, if it's like, oh, I'm obviously taking sleep, I don't know if I'll mess too much with that spell. But if it's an obvious decision, then that means it needs to be balanced a little bit. And that's where I'm going to take some liberties. That and like, for example, elves, a thief is like pretty much level 3 when an elf is like still level 1,
Mm-hmm.
So like the leveling, and I get why. I mean, elves are, they can cast spells and use any armor or weapons. Like, I get why that the XP required for each level is so much higher. But I just know that these are areas I'm going to have to house rule a little bit to kind of create a little bit more balance in the game.
Yeah. And this is honestly kind of one of the reasons, like, I was really, I've deeply enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for far, far, far too long. But one of the important things about this conversation is to keep thinking about the choices you make are very important, because you kind of have to make them. When you're making Weepstone, you have to make certain choices because it has to fit in a structure in a way that, like, I'm not, you or I are not forced to adhere to when we're at a table. We can do whatever we want, technically. But at the same time, you do need those guardrails and those structures, or else it just does feel a little too open-ended. Because I think back to Baldur's Gate 3, when they said, no, this is the level cap, because everything above it just breaks the whole game in half. And I'm not interested in that. Or when they were like, no, we don't have counterspell, because that will double the size of this entire game. Again, not interested. Or
Yeah.
even the small tweaks that they did that I know people just start adopting into their actual tables and certain things like that. So like, yeah, hearing the way you're approaching it, and especially through the playtesting that you're getting and the feedback and stuff like that, is really, really interesting. And yeah, there's definitely some pieces. I'm going to tell you the thing that has come to my mind that I didn't see in the demo, but I super want to do is a mortal disfavor. Because just because you killed the big bad doesn't mean that needs to be over. You killed the lich. I'm going to haunt you now. I'm going to have something bad happen to you for a long time. That sounds so fun to me now. The idea that, you know, if you lost a character and they have some intrinsic benefit that they will bestow upon you later down the road. But I think about, you know, at the end of the demo, who I fought. And, you know, once that was defeated, the idea of that still carrying on and haunting is super fun to me. And I'm really, really thinking about how I can do that as soon as possible. Dear players who do listen to this, to go away, stop listening.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. Mortal disfavor.
Because you think, especially when you get into more of the like esoteric or undead, or, you know, or you doing more Cthulhu style, things like that. The idea of having it sit with them, if nothing else, like what they went through, sit with them for a little while longer, I think is a really, really fun concept to play with.
So I will say this, there are opportunities there are more kind of permanent effects and boons that, than mortal favors. It's not all good. I don't call them mortal disfavors, but we'll just say that, yeah, there are other permanent effects based on your actions. As with everything, you know, since I'm the only person full-time, my brother he's gotten pretty close to full-time working on it in terms of helping with level design and propping and all that stuff. And then Hunter, who's writing it, you know, he's also running the publisher, Dread XP. So he doesn't have a lot of time to you know, he's got a full-time job. But and then I work with a bunch of great artists just on a free, you know, that have contributed art here and there. The list is pretty long at this point, which has been really fun. But, you know, when it comes to the scope of the game, I'm always having to bring it back in. You know what I mean? That's what there's so many, I have an idea list a mile long that I just won't be able to get in, at least not in this first one, because I just can't wait to have it done. So.
Yeah. And the format itself lends itself really well to more, because then, you know, even choosing to do the map the way you did is really compelling, because it, you know, from a visual perspective, opening up an old, you know, you feel like opening the U series and seeing the map and then it filling in as you go through really, really blew me away. I'm like, that's such a simple choice. And it's, oh yeah. I was like, okay, good job. All right. But like that.
Well, thank you for noticing that.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I might have opened the map a couple extra times just because I felt like it. But that kind of does get back to another thing. And I know we talked about it a little bit on email, but like being able to kind of grasp on and do a good job of bringing some nostalgia to this is a wild task, just because I know personally, we talked about video games. I know personally I've done this where I like in my head, I'm like, well, I'm older and I'm smarter. Obviously I can go play these video games. And then it was the crushing reality of like, well, what was actually happening is that you had a lot of free time to just get your muscle memory locked in, because no, these are grueling, punishing games. And unless you plan on putting that time back in, you're not going to win. So, but like the ability to kind of find those pieces that, like you said, like really speak back to that old school mentality. Like, is there a process? Is it just knowing it when you see it kind of thing?
I've been an artist my whole life, and I'm not an illustrator. I mean, in the early days of Jinx, I did all of the t-shirt designs and stuff, but I would say that my illustrations are charmingly bad is the best way I would describe them. But I've always been an artist, and when it comes to like what was the formula to get the nostalgia and to make it feel like it does in Weepstone. I mean, I think I could give you a list of 30 things that I wasted so much time on that maybe you wouldn't notice. But it adds to the vibe. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of little things. It's, Ian McLean who did he did the character sheet art. And we talked talked at length about how he was going to design it. And I was like, here's what, I'm going for. And he's an amazing artist that has done art for a ton of tabletop systems, and he plays himself. And he was like, okay, I'm going to use like the graphics design elements from the Mold Day book, and I'll incorporate that in subtle ways into the character sheet. And it's all of those little things. Of course, the old school DM map is, when you open it, but all of the graphics design down to the font choices on that module, I spent so much time on. When that module flips open, when you are going into the keep, that text is all legit. You don't even get to see it. It's so fast, but it is all legit text. There's a random encounter table. There's tavern rumors that are legit. And most 99% of players will not pause the game there. And I don't expect them to. I don't necessarily even want them to. But the magic words for me as a game designer are when I hear people say, the dev didn't have to do that. That's my favorite thing to hear. And so, when you go to the next part of this module, it's on the back cover. Like the obvious easy thing was you just change the art on the front cover. No, it goes to the back, and the back page of that module is the graphics design of it is based on all of the other modules that I had splayed out on the table when I was doing the graphics for the module. Like the back cover has like a new creature, like you can actually learn what you're going to come across, almost like a spoiler. And it's like, so it's just been every little, I have probably spent too much time on some of the details, but this is early on when I really just was making the prototype and trying to get it to where I needed it to be. And so it was just my own time and a passion project, and it still is a passion project, I guess. But now that it's got momentum, and of course, Dread XP has been awesome, and they're publishing it, and now I can't afford to spend all that time like I used to. But fortunately, the groundwork is all laid. The major system, we're pretty far along, obviously. Now it's just kind of like, okay, people like what the demo is. The rest of the game is more of that with additional systems like leveling up, magic, resting. Oh, that's another interesting mechanic or thing that I had to kind of solve for is resting and time passing, right? So the mantra when we're designing is, what would we do at the table? That's what we say every time we're not sure of how to handle something. We'd say, how would we do this at the table? And so when it comes to resting, it was like, you get to rest. You can't just have an encounter and then rest again. Like I would never allow that as a DM. It was like, you're not tired, what are you going to go all the way back to town? And I guess you could do that. They could do whatever they want, but generally I would discourage it. But there's all these different ways we could do time in Weepstone passing, and where can you rest? And this isn't in the demo, but so the way it works is you can only rest in rooms that are safe, that are marked as safe. So if you try to rest and it's not a safe room, the DM's like, it's not safe here, you can't rest here. Then I needed to have time passing. And instead of just having it to where time just passes, right? You just sit there and time is going by. You got to go and take a break and let the game run. Like, I didn't want to do that. That's dumb. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't want it to just be when you just move. So they just move back and forth a million times until they get tired and then they rest. Like, that's not fun either. The way that really it has to be is they have to play the game. They have to adventure. They have to explore. They have to take risks. They have to, that passes time. So the only thing that passes time is uncovering new tiles, basically, new terrain, new places of the dungeon. And then if you have an encounter, that's like a chunk of time goes by. And then when you open a room up, like a room is worth X amount of time as well. So if it's a really big room or a small room, it doesn't matter. If you've gotten into a new room, that's going to pass a bunch of time. And so that was kind of my solution for how to handle like how much time has passed. It's like, how much have you played the game? So far, so good. I think that's been working out, and we'll play with the number, like how much time has to pass until they're tired. That we'll play with and see until we get something that feels good. But then at that point, then if you find a safe place to rest, then you rest and you get some hit points back, and you can memorize your spells, and the once a day stuff resets. But that's just another example of like taking something to a video game, and there's like all these built-in, this is the way everyone does it solutions, but none of them felt great. And even though it would be obvious, and I don't have to teach the player that, it didn't feel like the tabletop experience to me. To just have campsites that you can click on and they can only be used once, for example. There's just these mechanics that are typical for video games, but they didn't feel authentic to me. And so I just iterated and iterated. And I think the system feels pretty good now, even though it's going to take a little bit of learning for players to understand how it works. So, but we'll see.
Oh, I like it where you you just had a fight and you want to sleep. Well, you know who doesn't want you to sleep? Everyone that just heard you fight.
Right.
That's in the general area. So
right.
Unless you show me why you had a spell or something that can make it work, it's probably not going to fly at my table either. The other thing that made me think of with the module, because I'm long past my days of coding, but you didn't have lorem ipsum there, and that's very funny to me.
Exactly.
I used to use this thing because I got so tired of having to fill in lorem ipsum. I hope this helps somebody out there in the world to make their coding life a little bit more exciting. There's a website called Bacon Ipsum. It's a meteor lorem ipsum where it just adds a bunch of meat-based words in the paragraphs, and it's just way more fun to look at that instead of just your classic. So
right.
Bacon Ipsum.
That's funny.
So that's super, super fun. Okay. So I will speak to part of my own experience in the demo because I think it's also important for both directions. I don't want to necessarily say, you know what, I'll tell you and then I'll cut it out because I don't want to tip off anybody that's going to play it, because I think everyone should play it. But there are certain points in the demo where I was thinking, hey, I wonder if X will happen, and X happened, and I could not have felt cooler in the moment. Just because like you do start to get into it's not like I broke the game. It's not like it made me more powerful in the game. It was just, okay, the thing that I kind of was like, will this happen? And then it totally happened.
That is the goal of game. Yeah, my goal as a game designer is to make you feel smart and and frustrate you just a little bit. Like if it's too easy, it's not fun. If it's too hard, it's not fun. It's like that magic, and it's different for everybody, unfortunately. So like that, where that is. But yeah, I'm erring on the side of, puzzle wise, I'm not trying to make, this really hard puzzle game. One thing I've learned in game design is, don't try to make it the maximum of every game type. And so this is not a combat only game. This is not a puzzle only game. This is an experience that it has all those things, but the puzzles aren't going to be like, if you're a hardcore puzzle fan, you're probably not going to come to this game just for the puzzles. They're not going to be that hard. Even though I love puzzle games, I'm not making a puzzle game. I'm making an adventure.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what it was, and I'll cut this out though. But okay. So right as I got out into the courtyard, I was like, "There's something going to freaking jump on me. I know it. I know it is." And like right as I turned around, I was like, "Kobolds! God dang it!" So I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, kobolds! Let's go, you little rat bastards." One of the other pieces that just hit me right now is some of the way that you handled. Trying to think of the way to describe this, because again, it's kind of translating it back and forth. So there's large pieces of art that you find within the game. And the way that you describe those and have those happen, I think is a really good way to kind of showcase someone having box text or illustrating more of like a paragraph of description, because I know that it's tough when the key element of a room that you go into, even in a dungeon, is not combat based. Because it's like you said, that mentality is kind of baked in of, I stab at it. What? There's only a table? It's probably an animated table. I stab at the table. And so those type of things. But when it becomes this, this mural or this tapestry or something along those lines, to have it still be compelling, I think it is interesting. And so like what you've done in the game, I think is another good showcase of having enough information without me. This is an extreme example, so it's not my intent to say it that way, but we all have players that are this way, that'll just get frustrated and try and set the tapestry on fire because the tapestry is still being talked about. But I think I think you were able to find like a pretty solid mix of enough information and a way to present it that is still fulfilling to the players, because I find that is a difficult thing still as a DM of, I don't want to, just as much as I don't assume my players want me to just monologue about something, but it's still information that they need.
Yeah. Like, and when I was writing box text, or when Hunter was writing box text, that was something that we learned in doing the game is, our intention and our hope is that we can release these modules. It'll be a 3-module arc in the game. And so our hope is to release them as physical modules as well. But the box text that's in a written module is going to be very different from what's in the game. What we quickly realized was we don't need to say there's a bed and there's a bookshelf against the right wall. That's obvious in a video game. You can see that. And so we cut out all of that stuff, most of that, and instead talk about what it smells like, what the aura is, maybe just some kind of like just a little bit of dialogue, like just describing and being cinematic about what they see in a way that would be, exciting. But I don't have to say in a video game, there's an ornate bed in this room. Like, I don't have to say that because it's, I can say this room looks opulent, but I don't need to say there's a desk. On the desk, there's some papers. Like, I don't have to say that. I want the player to explore and find that stuff on their own. And, I have the benefit of them being in the world. One kind of like weird thing that I had to do was, you have to have the interactable things kind of light up. And that was something that I was actually considering putting in an option to make it so that they don't actually light up for some players. Some players might prefer that they have to, I don't like just having to mouse over everything. And I'm not going to make it a pixel sized, a rock with 2 pixels where you get a ring of spell storing. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do that, but the objects are big enough to where I think it would be cool where until you hover them, which is kind of like your eyes looking, right? Like until you hover something, then it lights up. But as it stands, the way that ultimately I ended up doing it was you move around as you get closer, they light up brighter. And those are the things that you can interact with unless something is hidden. If something is hidden, it will not light up until you put your mouse over it. And in that case, once you've done that, now it will always light up when you get near it. Once you've discovered it, it'll give you a little visual or sound feedback, and it'll tell you that you found something secret, and then it will stay lit.
So I had an idea, but then also as someone that did work in IT for a long, long time, I immediately was like, this is the kind of thing that someone says to someone making the thing without fully realizing what it takes to do the thing that they're going to say. And like, I'll say it just because. I called it the button theory. Anytime I was working on something where they're like, well, you just add a button. And I'm like, yes, a button is possible, but you don't even begin to understand what it takes to make everything behind the button work. That's the same concept as like I get into a car that's a push start car. Yeah, all I got to do is push that button. But like as someone who's built a car from the ground up, like I fully understand what happened when you push that button. The amount of engineering and technology that went into pushing the button. Because in my head, I was like, you could add a slider to like how much of a light up function do I want. I was like, oh, a slider is probably so much more difficult than an on off switch.
Right.
It's immediately what came to mind was like, yeah, sure, Neal, it sounds like a good idea. So much more work than on and off.
Well, yeah, and all of the technology, the coding, I would. Can you imagine a world like what would the comment sections look on video games if everybody had to make a game first and then they could comment? Like the comments would be so much nicer on video games.
I feel the same way of like, do you know how much different it would be if everyone had to run a game first?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And then you can give feedback. If only that were a thing in the world, but people don't know that something may seem easy, and then they don't know not just coding it and making it all work, but how many other systems that affects.
Yep.
Like, oh, well, if that happens, or we've already tried that and it didn't work, or the thing I'm gonna hear a lot of, I know, is this isn't how basic expert works. I mean, the perfect example is Thaco. We decided not to use Thaco. And Hunter wrote a post about it. Hunter is like, who's writing it, the game. He's a rules guy. Like he's read he can tell you the history of every rule system ever made. But he wrote a blog that he called In Defense of Thaco and Why We're Not Using It. But at the end of the day, we decided not to use it. And I thought it's a funny blog post. And I was, there's always been the, peanut butter, jelly, Thaco. No, Thaco's the worst. No, Thaco's the best. And it's always been this playful concept. You know what I mean? I've always thought of it that way. But I got seriously like hate mail. So I got what I would describe as hate mail from one person in particular that was basically like, you would have thought that I like murdered his family because we decided not to use Thaco. And so I know that one of the things I'm going to be up against is when I need to make rule changes or decide to, for the purposes of Weavestone, because it just didn't feel right or it doesn't translate. I know there's going to be people that wish I did it differently and that would think to themselves, to the point of earlier, like, it would be so easy if you just did this. Why didn't you do that? And then I would be like, well, you got to go listen to the podcast where we talked about this because, I tried to do it this way and it just didn't work. And I changed it and now it's way more fun. Like this is a love letter to old school role playing. This is not slavish devotion. That's kind of one of the things we've been saying about it. I'm not like going to force a rule in just because that's how it used to be if it's just not fun or it's not working. I would love to do that, and I will sit with it and be uncomfortable for a good long while until I'm satisfied that there's no way for me to make it work, and then I will make a change. It's not a flippant decision, but I am not going to just put something in just because it was in the original rules if it's bad. If not bad, I want to say that's not the right way to say it. If it doesn't work for Weavestone.
Yeah, I think the same with, we already mentioned Baldur's Gate 3. They chose to set a limit on levels. They chose to change other rules. They chose to not allow certain spells. I think the same way when I watch movies now. I've gotten a lot better about it where, it's not like the book. It's like, of course it's not like the book. The book has no limitations on production budget. They have no limitations on the number of actors they can put. They also don't have any limitations like your imagination doesn't. Like, of course, there are just certain aspects. You can be frustrated at the movie on its own merits and have issues as to why you're not enjoying it as a movie, but to be, like you said, completely beholden to one direction or the other. Also, look, could I Thaco? Yes. Is it intuitive? Mind-numbingly no. To someone who's been playing 5th, let's take this back. To someone who's been playing 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and now is going to jump back in, it's not the most intuitive thing to have them come along with you on. Will they get it? Yeah, because people understand brand new games that come out all the time and the systems within them. But it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't need to be an additional stumbling block for someone trying to experience the game.
Yeah. And of course, inevitably, I've heard many times just add a checkbox in the options to use THAC0. Just add a checkbox.
Oh
It's
no.
easy. How hard is it to put a
Yeah,
checkbox
it's
in a
the
game?
button theory. That's what I said. It's the button theory.
Yeah. I've heard that several times. Just put it in the options. How hard is it to add a checkbox to the options? And I was like, okay. It is
Two
I have
completely
thought still
calculation systems for all things.
Yeah, and one of the goals of the entire game is like there is no scrolling text box in the game that shows all the stats and the data. That's not in there, and I didn't want to put it in there, and then one of the producers at Dread XP was like, yeah, no, this is like what you're doing. He's like, do not add a text box. Because you roll a die, it shows like the values +1 for strength, +1 weapon. It's all right there and easy to understand. And I'm trying to keep it very simple like that. And one of the things I've heard a lot, especially from newer players, is Baldur's Gate 3, which again, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. I loved that game.
Oh, yeah.
I played 120 hours or something in that game. It was so good. But for players that don't know D&D at all, it's you can do anything you want. It can be pretty confusing, I think, for some players. And so they were excited to play Weepstone for its simplicity. It's easy. There's not a lot going on that you don't just see. It's all like above the hood. There was a little bit of like, oh, what is this first to hit die? Like they don't, believe it or not, there's people that play games but still don't know that. But it's not complicated. It's a basic combat. It's a basic game in a lot of ways I'm still trying to make you feel as much as possible. Like if I can make you feel all kinds of things, then I have succeeded.
Heck yeah. We're kind of running out our time. I don't know if this next section will work. I had not thought this through at all. So typically what we do at the end is we give people air quote homework, which is really just fun stuff for them to read, watch, interact with that would kind of speak back to the topic at hand. Obviously, I will suggest going to Steam and downloading the demo and just playing, because that's the smartest thing you could possibly do. I did it and you should do it too, because it's super fun. I don't remember. How long would you say the demo is? I just played it. I didn't even think to.
I've heard varying. I would say 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. It depends on how slow you go. And, some people click through the dialogue and stuff like that. But I would say 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say I was probably ballparked myself around an hour, because I was doing exactly what you said. I was every little nook, every cranny, but I was taking my time and like kind of thinking through. Obviously, I spent a little extra mental math, and because then I was like, I have to reach out. That's literally what my email said. Had to reach out.
Right.
So obviously I spent a little more time, but yeah, it's definitely worth a playthrough. I really like your advice of just rereading an old module.
Well, here I will warn you about that.
And
this is something I learned in rereading old modules. So I still love them. Don't get me wrong. But there was some modules, like, I don't know if you played the Against the Giants series, like the G series. But in my memory, some of my best memories of all time was the Against the Giants series. I had not reread that module in a long time. And what I realized in rereading them is like the first, like G1, it's just like empty room, and then like room with giants. Like it's basically that over and over. And what I realized, and again, I still love the adventure, don't get me wrong, but what I realized was so much of the fun of my memories came from the things that we did and the stories that we had. Like when my pseudo dragon killed a storm giant or something with the point that didn't save versus poison, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like that memory, that's not written into the module. That was just what happened when we played it. And so that comes out in Weepstone when there's some really fun things you can do that came about when we play. Like our process is build the game, put in fun things, don't get me wrong. But then when we're play testing it, we're like, oh, you know what we would do if we were really playing this adventure? We would do X. And then we write that into the game. I'm so excited. We just had a all weekend planning session this last weekend at my house. And we had some ideas that I cannot wait to put in the game. But those little moments and stuff are based on, I realized, the fun of what you decide to do, these creative, weird, funny, heroic, whatever they end up being, those experiences are what made those modules so good. Now, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh was just great, still just like I remembered it when I just reread that one. White Plume Mountain is the same. Like, I just love that adventure in its raw form.
Barrier Peaks is up there for me as well.
Yeah, but like some of the old, like some of them, like Caves of Chaos is a Monster Hotel. I still love that module, and we just played it again last year. I still love them, but they're fun. The fun of them and the charm of them comes from, what you decided to do and not what's in the written word of those modules. That's what I've kind of realized.
Yeah.
So anyway, but as far as like homework, one thing I would say, if it was like something for people to check out, obviously Secret of Weepstone, please wish list it. That makes a world of difference, and try out the demo and let me know. And then also, if you want to do something else that's fun, look up these Lost World books.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's something I would write. I mean, if you want to find this, like, you can find them on eBay. You can get a few books. There's probably places you can just download them and print them if you want to try it that way. But it's a fun kind of in-person, silly game, beer and pretzels, where you can sit down and fight somebody else in a format you've probably never played before. It's so charming.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend Lost Worlds. And then at some point down the line, maybe you can play my Discord version of it, because it has all the art baked into it and everything. And it's a nice little Discord bot, but it's not public or anything yet.
I'll definitely pick your brain about that afterwards. But I've links to most of that in the show notes, and now I got to go read one of my 2 copies of Secrets of Saltmarsh.
That's right.
I got to go do it. But also, where can people go on the World Wide Web? Where is the place you would direct them to see all the stuff you're doing?
So Talesworth.com is the main site. I mean, I don't know how much people just go to a website anymore. My Discord is, if you want to come and talk to me, I live on Discord. That's discord.talesworth.com. I'm on Instagram and I'm on X. Those are my 2 social platforms. So that's where I post updates. Not as many as I should probably, but I'm not a big social media person. Yeah. If you search Weepstone, you find all these things, but, and then get the demo on Steam.
Perfect. We'll definitely have to have you come back on, because this was super fun picking your brain about, like I said, that ouroboros of video game to TTRPG and back and forth.
That's right.
We just want to thank Sean again for coming on, spending some time with us, telling us about the process that he used for adding TTRPG goodness into a video game, and the things that we can learn from that process and fold back into our own games. And of course, if you like this and you want to tell us about how you've been using video games, your TTRPG games better, you can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. And of course, you can head over to Apple Podcasts, your podcatcher of choice, leave a rating and review. And you can head over to social media and find us at DMS_block. That's at DMsBlock. And as always, we're a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like Knocked Prone, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, and more. But as always, thanks for listening to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods, killing characters, and lowering the egos of everyone else at the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
I think in the middle of the game, you should just rotate chairs and not tell them. And then someone randomly is the dungeon master. It'll be fine.
Goodbye.